I want to first say to Father Theriot's brother Gordon, and to the members of your family, to the Piazza clan, the relatives and friends of Father Theriot, to offer to you, certainly in my own name and in the name of the whole church, our sympathy, our prayers, and more importantly, our profound gratitude that we've been privileged to share in the life of this good man. I also want to express thanks to Father Blanda and the entire community of St. Mary Magdalene and Armenian Catholic, as well as the hosts of Don's friends from near and far for their loyal and faithful attention and care to him, not just in recent weeks, but throughout all those years. Donald C. Theriot. Other than his brother, does anybody know what the C stands for? Claire. Donald Claire Theriot. Known to us by many names: Father Theriot, Father T, the Donald, Padre, Don, his Gaydon name, Pookie, and a few others best not repeated here. Don, as you may have noted in the obituary, was born on November 20th, 1931. He died just 1 week short of his 82nd birthday. And I think the large crowd gathered here in this church gives testimony that Father Theriot was deeply loved, and that he in return loved the priesthood and was always very proud and very loyal as a priest. There's a story about an old parish priest, I think out west, who, while he was still in full health, decided to video his own funeral homily that he wanted to be shown at the funeral mass. And after he passed away, the family decided they'd best take a private look at this video. As they watched, he began by saying, "Now there are two reasons why I'm taping this homily. The first, I want to make sure that nothing bad is said about me. And two, I don't want anyone telling lies to make me out better than I was." Well, I can assure all of you that I will do neither. My friendship with Don began 50 years ago, when he trained me as a little boy to serve at the altar in this very church. And like many other guys, I loved serving funerals with him, because he'd come over to Mount Carmel and pick us up in his sleek 1965 Plymouth VIP, which at the time was a classy car. And I remember him one time telling me that it stood for very important priest. And before he returned us to school after the funeral, we'd always stop for a Coke float at the Park Avenue restaurant just down the street from Mount Carmel. At the time, little did I know that he was also nurturing in me the seeds of a priestly vocation. Like many of my brother priests, he was a wonderful mentor and a good hero in the church. A couple of days ago, while at his bedside, we talked and looked back on all those years. I remember him smiling and saying to me, "It's been a great ride, Louis." And I couldn't agree with him more. The famous Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw once said, "When I die, I want to be all used up. When I die, I want to be all used up." Those words very accurately describe the passing of this good man. Because when God called him home last Wednesday, his life was indeed all used up. All used up, living out the call of his priesthood. All used up, loving and serving the people in his life. And all used up, living the gospel. After my own ordination, Don and I had the chance to live and work together when I was named Director of Vocations for the diocese and went to live in residence with him for several years at St. Pius X. He and I and Sister Carm called those years Camelot. And we were a great team and worked well together. But it was always clear Don was the one in charge. I remember after a couple years being there, he was losing a housekeeper, and he told me he wanted to ask my mom to help out because she was just retiring from her catering business. I said, okay. So she cooked for us through the summer months, never serving less than about 8 or 9 or 10 people. The yard crew was always there eating as well. And at the end of the summer, he said, Louis, I think I'd like to ask your mom if she wants this job full time. And I said, Don, I don't know if I'd feel comfortable about my mother cooking for me every day all these years. He looked at me and said, well, you can leave. But Abbeville, however, always loomed large in Don's life, didn't it? He loved his years here, first as a young priest with Father Marshall Lariviere, who was also a mentor of mine, and along with their pastor, Monsignor Ignatius Martin. And then when he returned in 1987, after he left Pius, and stayed here for 15 or so years until he retired in 2002. As the Abbeville Meridional so accurately reported in yesterday's paper, Father T, while he was pastor and after he retired and lived here, was a quintessential booster and supporter of Vermilion Catholic. That man's heart pumped maroon and gray blood every day. He was a fierce competitor with all sports, and especially football. We all know he had a real hard battle, health-wise, especially these last few weeks. But to be honest, I think that one of the larger parts of his motivation to try to get well was wanting to sit in the Superdome in December to watch his Eagles win state championship. Well, he'll have the best seat in the house, so get there. Father Donald Theriot was a great priest who touched the hearts of countless people. Since his death Wednesday morning, I've had calls from friends in Oregon, Nevada, Chicago, Dallas, and points beyond. One person summed it up this way in an email to me. He was the first human voice of God in my life, and my first understanding of the acceptance and compassion of the church. I loved him very much. Wow. Could a higher compliment be paid to someone? To be the human voice of God to another. One of the most often heard compliments about Don was that he was a great preacher. He really was a wonderful preacher. I recall Pope Francis on Holy Thursday this past year. He gave a powerful message to us priests. He said that a good priest anoints his people with the oil of gladness by preaching the gospel with unction, that is, with the soothing, comforting words of God. Now that was truly Don in the pulpit. He was St. John Chrysostom and Fulton Sheen all wrapped up in one. He had the golden mouth for sure, an eloquent and convincing preacher who drew you closer to God. Sister Carmen and I last night were remembering how at Pius X, people would drive in from out of town just to hear his Mother's Day homily. And Don used to judge whether he gave a good homily on how many moms he got to shed a few tears. And he always delivered. But you know, the death of a priest is unlike the death of any other. We feel it differently. We feel it deeply. Because we sense that in losing him, we've lost not only the man, but his unique way of showing God to us. The voice that spoke of God is now silenced. The hands that once blessed and anointed us now lie still. Those piercing eyes that showed his love and his forgiveness to us are now shuttered. No one will ever again exemplify Christ for us in the singular way that this particular priest did. Several years ago, I remember reading the little book, The Life of Pi, now an Oscar-winning movie. It was a story of a teenage boy traveling with his family by ship off the coast of India. His father had owned a small zoo in India, and they were moving lock, stock, and barrel. An accident sinks the ship, and the boy, Pi, finds himself alone on the lifeboat with a tiger and a number of other animals from the zoo. Well, sadly, one by one, the tiger eats the other animals until only Pi and the tiger are left. I think it was about at this point in the story that Pi utters a line that I've never forgotten. Life is so beautiful, death has fallen in love with it. Isn't that marvelous? Life is so beautiful, death has fallen in love with it. Today, you and I come to lay to rest a man, a holy priest of God, whose life was beautiful. Pi was right. This life was so beautiful that death has fallen in love with it. In all the places Father T served these 56 years as a priest, he brought a warmth and a wisdom forged by his own spiritual journey. To all those he met, he brought a caring presence, garnered from his own experience of life and priesthood over all these years. His life of quiet service spoke for itself. It was as a priest that Don lived, and it was as a priest that he died. Our love for this man brings us here today to celebrate the journey of a life, of his death and his call to resurrection. A life so beautiful that now death has fallen in love with it. In closing, I would just add that in our ordination rite for a priest, the bishop gives the candidate this most solemn instruction. He says, meditate on the law of God. Believe what you read. Teach what you believe. And put into practice what you teach. Don paid attention. He believed it. He taught it. And most importantly, he lived it well. And so, dear friend, all of us here are poorer by your passing away. But we are richer by your presence in our lives. And so we say, well done, good and faithful servant. Go now. It's time to share your master's reward. May he rest in peace. Amen.